Good morning.
Laču dvesa rengia.
Welcome to the working session on participation of Roma and Sinti in public and political life. My name is Dan Pavel Dogi. I'm the head of the contact point for Roma and Sinti issues of the OSCE ODIHR. I would like to say a few words about the topic of the session this morning. It stems from the OSCE Action Plan on improving the situation of Roma and Sinti, adopted in Maastricht 2003, and it focuses primarily within the Chapter 6, enhancing participation in public and political life. A most recent development in relation to this topic is the ODIHR third status report on participation of Roma in public and political life. We've launched this third status report December 2018, and we hope that today in today's sessions we will manage to review a number of progresses made by participating states in this regard. My colleagues will let me know soon about the time allocation for interventions. But until then, a couple of technical information. The first part will be covered by my opening words and then remarks by the introducers. This will be followed by 2 hours and 15 minutes for interventions from the floor. During the last 15 minutes, delegations of OSCE participating states will have a possibility to exercise their right of reply, and if there is time, we will hear final summary reflections from the introducers, after which I will close the session. As always, seats in HD plenary hall are designated, as indicated on signs placed around the table. All participants are requested to respect this seating arrangement throughout the session. Live streaming of the 2019 HDIM is available. Filming with the cameras and video cameras is only permitted by accredited journalists and only during the opening and closing plenary sessions. No other audiovisual recordings should be undertaken without the explicit permission of individuals being recorded. I would like now to proceed to introduce our first introducer of the session. And the first introducer is Ms. Zola Kondur from Ukraine, from Council of Europe office in Ukraine. Zola Kondur has been a lifelong human rights advocate. She was raised in a traditional Roma family, but unlike many traditional families, the parents gave education to all 6 children. In response to a serious lack of services for Roma girls, Kondur helped to launch the Chiricli International Roma Women's Fund in 2000 to advocate on behalf of Roma women across Eastern Europe. Kondur's advocacy on human rights and passion for Roma issues has led to consultancies with international human rights organizations, including a current role with the Council of Europe. Ms. Kondur, please, you have the floor.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, civil society representatives, Romalan, Tev and Bachtale, it's a big honor for me to be an introducer at this very important session on political participation of Roma people in OSCE region. In many OSCE member states, Roma constitute a sizable part of the population. Despite this, Roma are largely absent from local and national political decision-making. Roma communities in many places officially do not exist due to their absence from official registers, including the census. The official invisibility of Roma people negatively affects public funding that could help Roma communities with healthcare, education, employment, and housing. This invisibility also undermines the potential of Roma political participation and Roma-led social change. other barriers associated with extreme poverty, illiteracy, poor infrastructure, lack of identification documents. The lack of IDs is often a significant factor for the social exclusion of Roma and Sinti in a number of participating states. Populism and explicit inclusion of racist and xenophobic agendas in mainstream political discourse are posing increasing challenges in the OEC region. Anti-Roma racism remains a prominent tactic for mobilizing constituencies driven by hate, resentment, and prejudice. According to ODIHR's third status report on implementation of the action plan on improving the situation of Roma and Sinti within the OEC area, in many OEC member states, there are no institutional policies and programs in place to promote the active role and participation of Roma communities in government decision-making processes. Moreover, there are easy targets for vote buying due to their vulnerable situation and social exclusion. Roma are poorly represented at local level. They're very seldom involved in the decision-making process on issues which are relevant for their inclusion. When it comes to Roma women participation, the gender dimension has long been neglected. In addition, being part of a minority, they're facing double discrimination by society and Roma community, and practically deprived from the opportunity to participate in political life. The OEC Action Plan on improving the situation of Roma and Sinti tasked participating states to promote Roma women's participation in public and political life, adding that Roma women should be able to participate in an equal basis with men in consultative and other mechanisms designed to increase access to all areas of public and political life. The 2010 Council of Europe Strasbourg Declaration on Roma recommends promoting effective participation of Roma in social, political, and civic life, while the newly adopted Council of Europe Gender Equality Strategy 2018-2023 sets out to achieve balanced participation of women, men in political and public decision-making, and to empower women candidates. To foster the political participation of Roma men and women and bring them closer to local, national, and European decision-making bodies, the Council of Europe launched Roma political schools from September 2019 in Greece, Italy, Portugal, Turkey, and Ukraine. In Ukraine, the launching of the political school was done in a very close cooperation with the parliament. These political schools includes Roma with the will to participate in local elections and possible national and European elections as representatives of their communities. When we speak about consultative and other mechanisms designed to increase access to all areas of public and political life, I want to say that the Council of Europe has been a privileged witness to some of the positive developments since 2013 through its actions in the Roma II program, ROMACT, and more recently ROMACTED, joint programs of the European Union and Council of Europe. For example, Roma II program stimulated the self-organization of Roma communities into community action groups. Through a structured process of dialogue and cooperation with local authorities, the community action groups identified the priorities of the community and suggested initiatives for addressing them. It is being implemented in 54 municipalities in 11 countries: Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Portugal, Romania, the Slovak Republic, North Macedonia, and Ukraine. However, much more efforts are needed by participating states to ensure that Roma and Sinti are equal and effective partners in policy-making processes and in the implementation of all measures concerning them. Further efforts are needed to ensure diverse political leadership, promote ethnic diversity in institutions, and enable the participation and representation of Roma and Sinti, including women and youth, in public authorities and institutions, as well as governments and parliaments. Skills building programs for Roma activists and local elected representatives are needed so they can communicate with and engage citizens, advocate for priority issues, and develop realistic legislative and policy options. Policy implementation addressing Roma and Sinti is often most active at the local level, particularly considering the principle of decentralization. Hence, it is of particular importance that consultation mechanisms entail effective involvement of Roma and Sinti while fully considering the needs and priorities of Roma and Sinti communities as determined by and together with them. Roma need real policies and legislative agendas that address genuine everyday needs. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for sharing your suggestions, your recommendations, as well as the analysis over this important topic that is really a prerequisite for Roma and Sinti to participate meaningfully and on equal footing in their societies. I would like now to introduce our next introducer, Mr. Julius Rostas from Romania. Dr. Julius Rostas is visiting professor at Central European University in Budapest. Dr. Rostas is the editor of the book 10 Years After, A History of Roma School Desegregation in Central and Eastern Europe, edition from 2012. And in 2011, he published Social Inclusion or Exclusion, The Rights of Persons Living with HIV in Moldova. His most recent publication is the book A Task for Sisyphus, Why Europe's Roma Policies Fail. Mr. Rostas, you have the floor, please.
Thank you. Roma and Sinti are considered the largest minority group in Europe, yet they remain absent from the important political debates taking place in the power centers of the political systems of the countries where they live, whether those debates are at national, regional, or local level. Nevertheless, over the past 29 years, one could notice improvements with regard to Roma and Sinti political participation in different OSCE participating states. A closer look at the electoral processes in many OSCE participating states indicates some of the obstacles Roma and Sinti face in achieving higher political influence. Some of these obstacles have been openly established by law. Some other obstacles include the indirect consequences of electoral regulations, such as when the electoral threshold for entering national parliaments is raised, or when more restrictive rules for registering political parties and candidates in parliamentary and local elections are instituted. Political participation of Roma and Sinti is a complex phenomenon shaped by different factors, such as the design of electoral systems, the regulatory framework related to elections, the minority protection system, the external pressure on participating states, factors related to domestic and foreign policies, the evolution of international relations, and other factors related to Romani self-organization. Generally, the findings and conclusions of the ODIHR status reports, as well as those emerging from the series of events organized by ODIHR throughout the years, with a focus on participation of Roma and Sinti, indicate a very modest and unsatisfying progress of this essential prerequisite for the genuine inclusion of Roma, which is political participation. With every unfolded event and status report produced, same or very similar recommendations are reiterated, urging participating states to step up and accelerate their efforts in this regard, underlining that a real breakthrough in improving the situation of Roma and Sinti can only be achieved through the empowerment and effective participation as partners in all policies concerning them. CPRSI reports have revealed the mechanism of exclusion of Roma from political participation. Obstacles in exercising their voting rights due to lack of identification, inaccurate voter registries, lack of voter education, illiteracy among Roma, vote buying, family voting, other legal and administrative impediments. The fact that such practices are tolerated and remain unsanctioned by the authorities send a message that Roma voting matters less within the electoral processes. The fact that Roma candidates in mainstream political parties remain an exception could be related to this perception of Roma as a less significant political mass, which at best could be manipulated through vote buying. As some scholars put it, these practices are part of a larger mechanism of exclusion of Roma pertaining to what is usually called anti-Gypsyism. Other scholars have specifically focused on hate speech against Roma during electoral campaigns and the potential impact in creating an intimidating atmosphere for Roma, both as candidates and voters. To sum up, the most important challenges to Roma political participation are the scarcity of data about Roma and Sinti participating in politics, the gender disparities among Roma men and women when it comes to political participation, the voter registration and vote buying. A specific issue is the engagement with local authorities, the efficiency of minority representation mechanism, which is usually believed to address the problems faced by Roma, the diversity among Roma, which is not represented within this representation mechanism, and of course the cooperation with Roma NGOs. As a conclusion, I'd say that there is no need for further commitments, as the existing ones are sound and comprehensive, and neither there is any shortage of good practices or even tools and instruments. What is really lacking is the political will of participating states to respect and fulfill their commitments towards Roma and Sinti. And I'll move on to a set of recommendations, and I'll start with the recommendation to the OSCE ODIHR. The first recommendation is to develop regional initiatives for political education of Roma in the participating states, to continue to monitor election processes in the participating states with due attention paid to Roma communities and the representation of Roma women and youth within these processes. And of course, to recruit whenever possible Roma as part of the OSCE electoral monitoring missions. And this is really important to ensure the fairness of the process. To participating states have a set of recommendations. Develop and implement legal measures to effectively combat anti-Gypsyism, including structural discrimination. To create mechanisms for effective political representation of national minorities in decision-making process at all levels and go beyond the consultative status of most of these institutional arrangements. Make sure that Roma and Sinti women and youth are included in such mechanisms. Develop and implement projects aiming at electoral education of marginalized groups, including Roma, with specific focus on Roma and Sinti women and youth. Enforce consistently the legal provisions against vote buying. Enforce immediately the legal provisions on hate speech, especially in cases involving politicians and state officials. Encourage mainstream parties to include Roma and Sinti on their list of candidates by promoting diversity programs. And last but not least, collect data on Roma and Sinti political participation. And I have also a few recommendations to Roma and Sinti organizations. Make use of all the opportunities to participate in decision-making processes at all levels. Organize Roma and Sinti and engage actively with local authorities and other state institutions to address the needs and priorities of Roma and Sinti communities. Pressure the mainstream political parties to include Roma and Sinti candidates on their lists with special attention to Roma and Sinti women and youth. and continue to monitor electoral processes and report cases of hate speech and other incidents against Roma and Sinti. Thank you very much for your attention.
And I thank you very much, Mr. Rostas, for sharing with us your analysis over the situation of Roma with regard to participation and access to political life, and for the very specific recommendations. A number of technical aspects again. The time limit allocated for each intervention is determined by the number of people who have signed up for the speakers list, which currently has 32 speakers registered. The speaking time limit is 3.5 minutes. I would like to remind participants that all interventions should be presented in a meaningful, orderly, and respectful manner, observing the time limit and focusing on recommendations related to the topic of the session. Please keep comments brief and to the point, starting with the recommendations related to the session's topic. I remind participants that criticism is welcome, but should be constructive. Those who have prepared their statements, and they have it in electronic form, I encourage them to distribute them to the documentation distribution desk. I would also like to remind that participants can only speak in the capacity in which they are registered, and only entities registered on the speakers list can take the floor. I also remind the representatives of participating states that points of order can only relate to procedural issues, and when it comes to the substance of the matter under discussion, they are welcome to use the right of reply. I will now proceed with giving the floor to the registered speakers. The first speaker is Romania on behalf of the European Union, followed by Slovakia.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The following states have already aligned themselves with this statement: Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Georgia. Mr. Chairperson, I have the honor to take the floor on behalf of the European Union and deliver the following recommendations and messages regarding the Roma and Sinti issues in the OSCE area. We thank to the Slovak chairmanship for this decision to specifically select the topic Roma and Sinti for 2019 Human Dimension Implementation Meeting. It shows once again that improving the situation of Roma and Sinti within the OSCE area should remain a priority for each OSCE participating state. We welcome the persistent efforts of the contact point on Roma and Sinti issue in the ODIHR in this field, and to reassure him of our support in his further efforts. The EU is strongly committed to pursue the efforts in combating hate crimes and countering intolerance in all kinds of forms. I would like to deliver the following recommendation regarding the Roma and Sinti issue in OSCE area. Take measures to combat any form of violence motivated by racism or xenophobia, and ensure a vigorous, effective, and independent investigation of racially motivated acts, as well as equal access to effective remedials, juridical, administrative, conciliation, and mediation procedures. Hate-motivated attacks and violence against Roma and Sinti individuals must be immediately and fully investigated, and the responsible person held accountable. Encourage OSCE participating states to make use of the ODIHR's role in conflict prevention and identification of areas of early intervention, and draw on the expertise of the OSCE High Commissioner on National Minorities in this regard. Take action in order to increase the confidence of Roma and Sinti persons about reporting incidents of discriminatory treatment, hate-motivated attacks, and the trust that the competent authority treat these complaints into a serious manner and follow up on them. Design and promote policies and programs meant to build trust among police and Roma and Sinti individuals. We encourage to use by participating states of the valuable expertise and assistance of the contact point on Roma and Sinti issue in this field. Taking into account that anti-Gypsyism remains an important barrier into Roma inclusion, Strongly encourage participating states to promote rights awareness campaigns about historical discrimination and segregation. Ensure a more effective Roma participation in policy making at all levels, and involvement in the design, implementation and monitoring of policies for Roma, thus strengthening Roma voice on the ownership of the process. We once again encourage participatory states to strengthen their cooperation with the contact point on Roma and Sinti issue, take advantage of its expertise and actively promote the human rights and fundamental freedoms of Roma and Sinti individuals across the OSCE region. Accurately address the specific disadvantage faced by Roma women, children and youth and other vulnerable Roma and Sinti individuals, persons with disabilities, elder persons, etc. Roma women's issues should be systematically mainstreamed in all relevant policies designed for the Roma persons. Counter populist discourse and stop rhetoric that target the Roma and Sinti persons for political purposes. Promote cohesive and inclusive society for all individuals, societies for all individuals. Put greater emphasis on actions in the area of education and employment. Promote the training of mediators and training of trainers, and use tools to strengthen community-based approach and human rights. Ensure greater access to quality and non-segregated education at all levels. In this regard, intensify efforts for access to personal documents, civil registration and identity documents. Encourage participating states to take effective measures to ensure respect of fundamental rights, in particular improving access to employment, healthcare and housing. Pay particular attention to Roma and Sinti migrants, refugees and internally displaced persons, and ensure that they are treated in accordance with relevant international norms and standards of protection without any discrimination. Coordinated actions with another international relevant actors are important in order to avoid overlapping and for better responses. Ensure a periodical review mechanism of strategies, policies and measures related to Roma and Sinti in consultation with Roma and Sinti persons for a better adjustment to the situation on the ground. Continue and enhance cooperation among international organizations with regard to improving the situation of Roma and Sinti. And the last one is continue activities with the OSCE field operation with regards to improve the situation of Roma and Sinti. Mr. Chairperson, since 2011, with the adoption of the framework for the national Roma integration strategies by European Council, the European Union has put Roma and Sinti integration high on the political agenda. This legislative framework is constantly being assessed and updated. A recent evaluation by the European Commission, followed by the high-level conference of the EU framework for national Roma...
Could you please come to a conclusion?
Yes, national Roma strategies organized by the Romanian presidency on March 4-5 March 2019 indicated that the framework is the beginning of a process. We have been positive results and an initial change in trends. However, limitations remain and future steps are needed. The full version of my statement will be circulated in writing. Thank you very much.
And we thank you for the very comprehensive list of recommendations. I will now pass the floor to Slovakia, followed by Serbia.
Thank you very much for the floor. Fully in line with the EU statement, and thank you very much for the statement, a colleague from Romania. In our capacity as a member country and a country that currently holds EU chairmanship, I would like to make a few remarks regarding Roma and Sinti issues. It is absolutely utmost that policies that are being adopted and implemented within our countries are data-driven. Therefore, Slovak Office of the Plenipotentiary for Roma Communities has commissioned two major works on data collection. One is called Atlas of Roma Communities 2019, that draws on the experiences of previous two iterations of Atlas of Roma Communities. I'd like to point out that this is not an exercise in counting how many Roma we have. Rather, it's a socio-economic mapping that clearly shows the needs of Roma communities and where in the country they are. It also enables us to track progress in implementing large-scale interventions. Together with this, within the end of this year, we should have data on EU Silk. For those who do not know, it's a statistics on income and living conditions. These two data sets will enable us to design new interventions and better interventions for the next programming period, 2021-2027. When it comes to participation and showing just how well we're dealing with this in terms of a data-driven policy, it needs to be pointed out that our government has just adopted a law on making the compulsory education starting from year 5, which means that all children will have to attend kindergarten for at least 1 year prior to starting compulsory education at elementary school level. That will have an impact on education quality in Slovakia in general, but on Roma it will have an expected drastic impact in a positive sense. We're not just building kindergartens though, we're also supporting teachers, teachers' assistants, and most importantly, through EU-funded projects, also parent involvement with children and children's schooling. To the topic of EU participation, it needs to be pointed out that the focus of our office of the Plenipotentiary for Roma communities is focused on young people and training and as young leaders and role models. Together with this, we're also currently implementing a project of a local civil patrol that on one hand provides jobs for the most disadvantaged, but also builds bridges between communities so that communities do not live next to each other, Roma and non-Roma, but together. The main goal of these local civil patrols is in mediation on providing safety in the community, for the community, and by the community, and benefiting municipality as a whole. And lastly, it wouldn't do to not present the best of our office, is we lead by example by adopting and applying for EU Solidarity Corps. We've now received a project that will enable us, thank you, to offer genuine, open, paid internships for young Roma for work experience at our office. Thank you very much.
And I thank you very much for reminding us all about the importance of gathering data in a proper way, properly safeguarded to inform any policy making and allow for impact evaluation. I pass now the floor to Serbia, followed by United States of America.
Thank you. Serbia endorsed the declaration of Western Balkan partners on Roma integration within the EU enlargement process during the summit in Poznan. The action plan 2019-2020 for the implementation of the strategy is developed with the leadership of the Ministry for Labor, Employment, Veteran and Social Affairs, and with the participation of a wide network of stakeholders, governmental institutions, civil society organizations, and Roma community representatives. Fifth seminar on social inclusion for Roma will be organized by the Government of Serbia and the European Commission on October 2019. The Social Inclusion and Poverty Reduction Unit of the Government of Serbia will provide technical and expert support in the organization of the above-mentioned event. The Ministry for European Integration, in cooperation with the Ministry of Justice, informs the regular reporting on implementation of the Action Plan for Chapter 23 on the basis of the contribution of line ministries, Social Inclusion Poverty Reduction Unit, and the Office for Human and Minority Rights. Database on the monitoring of Roma inclusion has been established and is available on the website on the Statistical Office of the Republic of Serbia. This database is a significant contribution to coordinated data collection. According to the available data, 89 local self-governments have responded to the call and entered their data on a municipal level on the topic of social inclusion of Roma in 2018. In the area of housing, support is provided within the IPA program, IPA 13, IPA 14, and IPA 16, for the production of technical documentation for substandard settlements, planning documents, as well as experts supporting the legalization process. In addition, 20 new mobile teams in local self-governments are formed and empowered through the mentioned IPA programs. The Ministry of Health has increased the number of health mediators by adding 10 new municipalities. Therefore, 85 health mediators are engaged in 70 local self-governments. The rule book, which tackles typical discriminatory situations that are most common in our schools, has entered into force on September 1st, 2018. It is especially important to emphasize that the new rule book defines the segregation, preventive activities of the institution to prevent segregation, interventions and desegregation measures, and measures applied to individual children and students in the process of desegregation. The expansion of the network of pedagogical assistants is executed through the IPA 2 program, sectoral budget support, with the aim of expanding the network of pedagogical assistants. 50 new assistants are hired in the school year 2018-2019. So a total of 261 pedagogical assistants have been hired during the 2018-2019 school year in primary schools and preschools institutions. And my last point, the rule book on pedagogical and andragogical assistance has been prepared by the Ministry of Education, Science and Technological Development. Thank you very much.
We thank you for your intervention, and I would kindly remind registered speakers to make sure to provide the recommendations. I pass the floor now to United States of America, followed by National Roma Centrum.
Every Human Dimension implementation meeting provides an opportunity to take stock of how far we have come and what challenges lie ahead. We convene this special topic session 25 years after the OSCE organized its first seminar on the situation of Roma in the region. A great deal has changed, and a great deal remains to be done. The United States condemns all bias-motivated violence against Roma, including the mob attacks on Roma in Russia's Penza Oblast in June, which led to the forced displacement of an estimated 1,000 people. We urge the government of Ukraine to hold to account those individuals responsible for last year's attacks on Romani settlements in 7 cities across the country. Identifying bias motivation for violence crimes is important for several reasons. First, it facilitates the identification of patterns of violence and enables law enforcement and policymakers to respond when hate crimes increase. Second, it helps authorities determine whether a criminal act or a pattern of crimes also deprives individuals of other basic rights. Mob attacks against Roma often lead to their forced displacement, which contributes to other problems, including access to education. Hate crimes information submitted by OSCE participating states to ODIHR should include information about hate crimes committed against Roma. We are troubled by a senior Bulgarian defense official's proposal in February to target Roma for a reduction in their birth rate. This proposal runs counter to Bulgaria's most basic human rights commitments. We are also troubled by a mob attack against Roma in April in Gabrova, Bulgaria. In early April, a mob attacked about 70 Roma, including children, in a suburb of Rome. Proposals by government officials to conduct an ethnic census of Roma can fuel a climate of intolerance in Italy. Governments must do more to counter the corrosive effects of hate mongering and protect their most vulnerable communities from bias-motivated crimes. In France in late March, false kidnapping accusations against Roma circulated on social media and were associated with gang attacks on Roma in that country. We commend the efforts of local French police who issued statements to quell the inflammatory disinformation. Unfortunately, there are instances when law enforcement may perpetuate bias crimes against Roma, or use excessive force. We note that the 2019 OSCE Parliamentary Assembly Declaration, adopted in Luxembourg, urges participating states to ensure that those who report hate crimes or bias-motivated abuse of authority, including by law enforcement officials, do not face retaliation for doing so. Moderator, the United States supports the OSCE's efforts to address specific issues affecting Romani women, and we were concerned by reports about a 2014 Slovak law that imposes financial penalties on new mothers who leave the hospital without permission, and urge the government to consider how laws' disproportionate effect on Romani women may lead to potential abuse. We were encouraged to hear the Slovak delegates' remarks on the numerous initiatives utilizing data-based and measurable interventions to address disparities between Roma and other populations. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention. I would kindly remind all speakers to focus on today's selected topic, which is access to and participation in public and political life. I will pass the floor now to National Roma Centrum, followed by Hungary.
Thank you very much. Sorry, but because this is for me, after the more year, a very important day, and I have to speak Romanes because this institution is the friend, is the key to open the door from 1907 till now for participation of Roma in all level of dialogue communication in Europe and in world, and also who respect our culture, our identity, and our language is this institution. As part, I grow from this institution in the period of Mr. Nicolae Gheorghe, and now with Mr. Dan Dogi, and I hope that this will be give more a good possibility to see how to going and to realize the real politic in Europe and in world, and to return the Roma issues in agenda of all institutions in national level and international level. Sorry, but I am the person of the Europe, but also I am the Roma, and this is my right. I will now take Romanes.
Thank you very much. What I would say, there are so many paper documents, but the question is, does the documents provide us a good life, improve the situation? Do they provide access to participation? Do they provide access to inclusion? No. We too much trust, and we learn a lot from other diplomats. I would like to thank to all OSCE participant country. I understand the diplomacy, but the question is, just to speak, I would like from all of you as OSCE done, this is really important question, important issue. This is like new start, they say. To return back on the agenda, Roma question, Roma issue about Roma participation, public participation, political participation on the agenda, and on equivalent and effective work to be done, to be solved, many problems to be solved. I'm not speaking about problems. The problems are put in analysis, in research. All problems are on lack of personal documents, on housing, participation. We lack representation on decision-making policy. I'm coming from North Macedonia. In North Macedonia, we have changed 2-3 governments, but in real sense, to be change something as in the percentage can be shown. I would like to stop here, and I want to say that OSCE at this moment is the institution who really give us the power and strength us. now I urge you that the Roma voice should be taken seriously and the Roma position should be taken seriously, and it should be returned back on the high level on your agenda on national and international level. Now,
Remind the speakers of the importance and necessity of addressing recommendations to states and OSCE institutions and structures. I would also kindly remind that no other audiovisual recording should be undertaken without the explicit permission of individuals being recorded. There is live streaming of the current session, and please use that afterwards. I pass the floor now to Hungary, followed by European Roma and Travelers Forum.
Mr. Moderator, fully in line with the EU statements, the Hungarian National Social Inclusion Strategy is one of the basic strategies on the fight against poverty, social exclusion and inequality. The strategy is focused on people living in extreme poverty, poor children and Roma people. The key elements of the strategies are the complex approach and the cross-sectoral cooperation. The areas of intervention cover all the important areas from child welfare, education, employment, healthcare, housing, territorial cohesion, awareness raising and fight against discrimination. The Hungarian government is committed to reduce the poverty and the social exclusion and to avoid relapses in these areas. This has been confirmed through the implemented measures during the last years. I would like to highlight 3 from our measures that reach 8,000 disadvantaged and Roma child every year. Firstly, the Sure Start Children Houses that gives early intervention for 0 and 3 years old disadvantaged children. Secondly, the Tanada program which prevents dropouts. And thirdly, the Roma boarding school program that gives services for Roma university students. A while ago, or previously, these programs were financed from EU funds, but now they are part of the Hungarian service system and funded by the national budget. There are civil society organizations, churches, municipalities, self-governments of minorities involved in various public-funded inclusion programs. Cooperation and consultation with civil society has a great importance for us. There are several forums of partnership operated under the governmental bodies, such as Roma Coordination Council, that ensure a forum for dialogue on measures aimed at strengthening the inclusion of Roma people. Or I can also mention the Human Rights Roma subgroup with the main task of monitoring the assertion of human rights in Hungary, or the Roma platform that provides a floor for discussion between different levels of administration, ministry, local municipalities, authorities, and representatives from NGOs, churches, other organization bodies, Roma and non-Roma experts on several issues regarding Roma inclusion. One unique recent development in the field of Roma integration is that the government decided to implement a complex and long-term program aiming to enhance the social condition of 300 most disadvantaged settlements in Hungary, based on a good practice of an NGO. The so-called Presence program aims to implement settlement-level measures in the field of social support, healthcare, public health, living condition, employment, local economic development, education, and community development. The involvement of locals and local professionals is a key element of the progress. Civil, religious organizations are the key partners of the responsible policy actor, the Ministry of Interior, in the implementation of the program. A Prime Ministerial Commissioner was also appointed for the coordination of the process, which begins on the first 33 settlements in 2019. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your intervention. Next speaker is European Roma and Travelers Forum, followed by International Romani Union.
Mr. Chair, Your Excellencies, government representatives and civil society. Allow me first to thank, on behalf of Roma and Travelers Forum, the OSCE ODIHR for its devoted work and 15-year-long monitoring on the implementation of the recommendations directed to OSCE participating states on the Roma and Sinti Action Plan, and in particular to its current third status report. According to ERT member organizations' field monitoring reports, more than 115 pogroms were committed against Roma during the past 5 years. Each and every day, Roma women and children become victims of racist violence and hate-mongering by the media and politicians. The number of violent attacks against Roma as well as the number of injured Roma is too numerous to count. Since year 2000, more than 1,500 Roma in Europe have been murdered because of their ethnicity as victims of ultranationalistic actions and violent anti-Chicanistic attacks. Anti-Gypsyism is one of the main reasons why their general situation is not improving. Apart from small instances of progress in some countries, anti-Gypsyist policies harm inclusion efforts and deeply rooted stereotypes prevent politicians from committing to Roma and traveller inclusion policies on all levels. Therefore, the European Roma and Travellers Forum are supporting the findings presented in the third status report to the participating states and calls upon the participating OSCE states to denounce and eliminate racist violence and all forms of anti-Gypsyism/anti-Chicanism against Roma women, children, and towards entire Roma communities. Forced evictions of Roma without providing any alternative accommodation, and denounce and sanction populism and stereotyping of Roma and Sinti. Last year, 2018, the European Commission called upon the EU member states to put the fight against anti-Gypsyism at the forefront of efforts for the social and economic inclusion of Roma. The resolution calls upon the EU and member states to establish a European as well as national truth and reconciliation commissions to acknowledge and persecution, exclusion, and disownment of Roma throughout the centuries and to document these in official white paper. These demand A, a positive narrative, B, a strong and comprehensive policies to combat structural racism and anti-Gypsyism, C, measures progress towards equality, D, end state discrimination and violence against Roma, Sinti and other minorities, E, promote remembrance, and F, redress for histories of enslavement and Holocaust of Roma and Sinti. So, the Roma and Travellers Forum calls upon the OSCE participating states to follow the Council of Europe and European Union to recognize anti-Gypsyism as the specific form of racism which constitutes the root cause of the exclusion of Roma and Sinti and key barrier to their political participation. To adopt a ministerial council decision that strengthens the mandate of ODIHR to monitor and combat anti-Gypsyism and to enhance the political participation of Roma and Sinti as key priorities for an effective implementation of the OSCE action plan for improving the situation of Roma and
Sorry
Sinti.
to interrupt. I kindly encourage you
Thank
to
you.
submit your statement in the document distribution system.
I will. It is in a written, the comprehensive recommendations can be found on written statement distributed on the civil society documentation
Thank you.
table.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your
I
attention.
pass the floor now to International Romani Union, followed by Institute of Legal Policy and Social Protection, named in the honor of Irina Berezhna.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you very much. I will speak English as the president of Romani Union. And this organization is 50 years old. We will have anniversary next year when our flag is being adopted and our so United Nations recognize our ethnic ethnicity as Roma. Every day they are not called us Roma. You know how. And the program, what we are doing for anti-Gypsyism, anti-Semitism, I don't know what European Union gave a lot of money for this program to be created. But in this system where we came now, we didn't saw, me as the president of FIRU, because I cover 4 continents with our organization, our network in America, in Latin America, Asia, and Africa, where we have many Roma delegates from our network, from our organization. We're speaking about integration. Until now, we didn't saw any implementation concerning or started some process or in any country to stop, to prevent the killing. So what kind of crime has been done upon on Roma? OSCE is really good organization, and we're working already together with OSCE institution almost 20 years. Here, we establish very nice system about Roma monitoring. You open the door, OSCE contact point for Roma and Sinti issue. As a president, I want to say what we can do to cooperate with you. I will say just one example. In Ukraine, when Roma were murdered, the OSCE and the other institution, we as IRU, all of you, all stakeholders, we made a statement. And also we had a reaction, and we show reaction when in Bulgaria when happened some incidents. I was in Italy. I'm coming from the camp in Italy. I see the problems in Bulgaria because recently I had a field visit in all this country, but there is no reaction from the state on the national level. That's why we are here as a civil society. We are here to speak that I will give one proposal to react on each international observation. We, Roma, to be by ourselves, to send reaction on one place together with all stakeholders. When it's come in each country, when it's census or other elections, to be together and to do observation. Legalna protekcija.
Now followed by Roma Women Rights Center.
I am the director of the Institute of Legal Policy and Social Protection, named in the honor of Irina Berezhna. And regrettably, we've noted that not only are Roma and Sinti not integrated in government structures and state structures and local self-government structures in Ukraine, but also their electoral rights are also restricted. In 2019, we held presidential and parliamentary elections in Ukraine. However, the Roma basically could not take part. Why is that? Because the legislation in Ukraine states that only those with official housing registration can vote, which basically stripped the Roma of the right to take part in the elections. I'd like to note that our institute would like to express its full support for the recommendations voiced by Romania on behalf of the EU. We also want to underscore that in 2018-2019 in Ukraine, we saw an uptick in attacks waged by right-wing organizations targeting Roma. For instance, SIG-14, a neo-Nazi organization, which has been recognized as a terrorist organization by many international institutions. What they did was they went to Kiev and, in fact, they attacked a Roma camp. There was another incident near Lvov, a similar incident. Also in 2018, right-wing radicals attacked a Roma camp. These were Roma living in tents near the city of Ternopil. They used firearms, in fact, during that attack. In 2017, a branch of the National Guard, which is a state structure, raised a Roma camp in the city of Kiev. And in fact, they invited the media, all of the media working in the capital. So this was a pre-planned attack, and they were counting on support from the public. Another attack in 2018, a neo-Nazi group attacked a Roma camp near Lvov, and in fact, someone from Zakarpattia died. A lot of people died. In fact, there was a 10-year-old boy, two 19-year-old boys, and a woman. A woman was hospitalized following serious injuries. Now, someone just took the floor and said that we need to force the Ukrainian authorities to respond. But let me give you another example. Recently, there was a court which found guilty two people who were responsible for attacking that camp in Zakarpattia, but he was not sentenced, in fact, although he was found guilty. On the 23rd of October.
Recommended in the remainder of time.
Значит, что касается
You addressed your set of recommendations following on the topic of the session. Thank you.
Yes, turning to the recommendations. We've already heard this, and we repeat this and we insist that the OSCE petition the Venice Commission so that Ukraine revokes its law on the glorification of Third Reich officers who exterminated not only the Jews but also the Roma. That's the first thing. Second of all, we suggest that Slovakia, as the country holding the chairmanship, and also ODIHR, Slovakia and ODIHR should organize a separate meeting on neo-Nazism in EU states, specifically in Ukraine.
I pass the floor now to Roma Women's Rights Center, followed by Ukraine.
Andoanav kot internacionalno giublicani grupa kot ari Albania, manga
Roma and Sinti, particularly women and youth, in public and political life. And Human Dimension implementing meeting organizers for creating space through this working session to talk over it, progress done, challenges, then way forward. I am happy to share my insight over this topic. I have to recognize that Albania government commitment to respect Roma and Egyptian rights and address their vulnerable situation has been developed considerably recent years. Development of national and local action plans, adoption of legal provision to fight discrimination, appointment of Roma focal points to state institutions, recognition of Roma as minority, and partnering with many projects with international organizations shows that there is willingness to develop a sustainable and long-lasting approach. However, participation of Roma in public and political life remains still a concerning issue for Albanian Roma. Regardless, the national action plan for integration aims integration. It lacks to provide as a objective, as a strategic objective, the involvement of Roma in the public and political life. The recent adopted law on minorities do not foresee any measure to enforce political participation of Roma. Roma individuals, particularly women, continue nowadays to face multiple forms of discrimination due to their gender, ethnicity, economic, and other related reasons, such as lack of education and lack of civil registration documentation. Being in this condition, when they find themselves difficult to access basic services, and they have lost their interest to be involved in politics at all, I would convey my recommendation to the Albanian government representatives to include participation of Roma in public and political life as a strategic goal in the post-2020 National Action Plan, and adopt special measures to achieve it, to ensure by specific measures and legal provision and other relevant policies, quota or reserved seat for minority members by the political parties, to provide information and long-term supporting of Roma, particularly women and youth, to take part actively in the designing, implementing, and monitoring of local and national development plans. I would ask ODIHR department to make sure to involve Roma in all activities and do not rely only to the activities of contact point initiative office to support Roma, particularly young Roma women and youth who aspire to have or have potential to be in politics through suitable mentoring programs. And the OSCE ODIHR is the last one, and domain organization involved in observation, more observant in Roma communities. Roma and Egyptian individuals should be encouraged and supported to engage as observers. Thank you.
Thank you for raising your attention to the plight of Roma and Sinti women and youth and for the specific recommendations. Next speaker on the list is Ukraine, followed by Gatehertz hate crime ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Dogi. Andrei Yurash, I'm director of the Department for Religious Affairs and Nationalities in Ukraine. First of all, I would like to thank today's introducer, especially Mrs. Zola Kondur, for presenting some very good examples of positive implementation of politics related to the Roma communities. That is really good sign when representative of the public society as well of the international organizations can see positive steps and achievements of the official state institution in different countries, including Ukraine. A realization of the national strategy and action plan of integration of the Roma community into Ukrainian society is a subject of the permanent attention and practical efforts of the Ukrainian government. Important to remind that the special interministerial working group under the roof of the Cabinet of Ministry of Ukraine has been created in 2016. Simultaneously, 5 permanent working subgroups have been created for realization of the concrete directions of the politics related to Roma community. First group, which is responsible for law enforcement and migration activity, has had its meeting 3 times, even during previous and this year. It has initiated beginning of the important project in the measure of the whole country, Media Without Prejudice, which started this March. It presupposes increasing existing level of tolerance and mutual respect between different ethnic communities inside the Ukrainian society, especially toward the Roma one. Second working group, which is concentrating its activity around the question of housing, also has had 3 meetings, which were organized in places with the most numerous Roma settlements. Totally 9 cities and villages has been visited in 3 regions with highest number of Roma population. 3 other groups have also very important areas of responsibilities. Third one, about education and culture. Fourth, for social protection and healthcare. And the 5th one, for organizational and informational support of any activity related to the Roma community. Very important to understand that implemented model of functioning of the interministerial working group presupposes activity on several levels. Cabinet of Ministry as the highest level, practical work with involvement of the particular state bodies, mainly ministries, and finally regional covering of the issue in all 25 local administration. For coordination of all types of activity between all institutions involved into the process, a special structure has been installed in the direct communication with our department. I mean the activity of the special secretariat of the interministerial working group, with 2 people responsible on the permanent basis for supporting of any forms of interaction. All presented above details convince that Ukraine, in frame of the last 4 years, has achieved absolutely new level of covering all issues related to the Roma communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Next on the floor, Gatehertz hate crime ambassador, followed by European Roma Rights Centers, Brussels.
In terms of recommendations to the OSCE states by Gatehertz young hate crime ambassadors, we need more funded programs for the education of Roma and Sinti by OSCE states, especially in terms of political education, to be leaders of their own change and be represented in political and/or public positions. We need OSCE states to counteract mainstream media negative representation of Roma and Sinti people by OSCE states through policy intervention, allowing more editorial power to communities over their own experiences, and more funding towards training Roma and Sinti youth in journalism and film. This further includes more funding and public amplification of Roma and Sinti-owned media platforms. OSCE states need to educate elected representatives and authorities on Roma and Sinti issues and be held wholly accountable for expressing anti-Gypsyism. This includes allocating paid positions by members of the Roma Sinti community as these educators. Roma and Sinti participation in public and political life is growing. However, as an international society, we need to recognize there are current and historic mechanisms in place which have made being visible, both in public and political realms, as a Roma or Sinti person, a question of survival. To improve these circumstances, I will not beg you as a young person who deserves rights, but make these recommendations as demands. There is constant focus on perpetrators of anti-Gypsyism to be educated on our mutual humanity, and not enough focus on empowering members of the Roma and Sinti community through training and education to take ownership of their own experiences and be leaders of their own change. This will need to include funding to aid marginalized members of our communities to gain accessibility by OSCE states, to be represented in future political and public institutions in life. These education programs will also help Roma and Sinti communities to participate in local political issues for an understanding of political vocabulary, which in itself can be exclusionary, and be fully educated on aspects of public life as voting. We cannot continue to consistently give our stories and experiences unpaid to gadget political representatives to be then paid to express to other institutions. Roma and Sinti are experts in their own lived experiences, and OSCE states need to integrate funded and targeted education programs and training to allow this group to be empowered and access spaces previously closed off. We will no longer blindly accept the bare minimum, and we deserve public and political positions by the community and for the community. In the same breath, we need to hold our public and mainstream media representations accountable and challenge that of Roma and Sinti participation in public and political life. For those who are not politically engaged in mainstream society, media source is the main source of wider world knowledge, and topics surrounding Roma and Sinti are typically negative and misrepresented, as well as being wrote by non-members of the community. This contributes to stereotypes and racism towards the Roma and traveller community and makes public and political participation difficult because of the issues it can determine in terms of safety. On a final note, current political representatives need to be educated on and held accountable for anti-Gypsyism by OSCE states, and this needs to be done by community members who are experts on their own lived experiences. We need to ensure that political spaces aren't gatekeeping Roma and Sinti from wanting to participate, and that representatives aren't simply using the community as either a tool for inciting hatred or as a token minority to exploit for votes. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for providing very specific recommendations. Next on the floor, European Roma Rights Center Brussels, followed by Roma National Center.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding pressure from political actors which hinders the democratic participation of Roma, I will talk specifically about Hungary and Bulgaria. The ERSC recommends that Hungary increase oversight from the National Election Commission on the administration of the Public Works Programme in relation to vote buying and voter coercion of Roma. Reverse the policy which lowered the school leaving age from 18 to 16, making Roma more reliant on public works and at the mercy of vote buying and intimidation. And finally, to provide stipends to keep disadvantaged children in school until the age of 18, and to meet EU targets on education, employment and training to ensure Roma can access the labour market and fully participate in public life as active citizens. According to a Yale University study, Hungarian politicians use public works to influence elections. Romani public workers in the northeast of Hungary say that mayors promise job opportunities to only those who vote for the ruling party and deny them if they do not. Hungary's decision to lower the school leaving age from 18 to 16 has also left many Romani young people unable to access the labour market and left only with a public works system that prizes neither integration nor a future and allows them and their community to be manipulated by local political forces. Concerning Bulgaria, the ERSC recommends the government ensures that elected politicians
who incite racial hatred against ethnic minorities are fully held to account in a court of law and, if necessary, removed from their position of influence. We recommend that Bulgaria reevaluate the 6-month residency period, which is required for registration to vote. In theory, this was designed to reduce controlled voting. In practice, it disproportionately affects large numbers of Roma who are mobile or displaced and cannot prove 6-month settlement in any specific country or locality. In Bulgaria, the climate of violence, which is perpetrated by race mobs, often incited by high-level politicians, severely hinders Roma political participation. Forced evictions and displacement of Roma results in problems for them being able to vote in their registered locality. Additionally, the ERRC has observed that the anti-Roma climate in Bulgaria has notably worsened since March 2017 and the parliamentary elections. It cannot be overstated how damaging to meaningful political participation it is when elements of the ruling class use Roma as political scapegoats and then are not properly held to account for their actions. Former Deputy Prime Minister Valery Semyonov, the man who had mused about creating modern concentration camps and once referred to Roma as feral, human-like creatures, was acquitted of hate speech by the Supreme Court in January this year. Hate speech from high-level politicians not only alienates Romani voters, it endangers their well-being. Giving fascism its day in the sun by allowing hate speech at such a high level without repercussion only contributes to the cycle of anti-Gypsyism in Bulgaria and denies Roma the right to fully participate in civic life as active and equal citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker on the list is Roma National Center, followed by Ternipe, International Roma Youth Network.
Excellencies, dear colleagues and distinguished guests, my name is Natalia Dominica and I am a Roma rights activist from Moldova. Today, I would like to bring to your attention the barriers that limit participation and representation of Roma women in political life. Roma women want to sit at the tables and vote on the decisions concerning their communities, but they have to follow gender-assigned roles in their community and family. Inequalities in the division of parenting and household duties leave them at the margins of political and civic life. Experiences of daily discrimination deters their motivation to get politically and civically active. So what can be done to ensure that Roma women are not left behind political processes? I call upon Moldovan government to endorse and respect the OSCE action plan on improving the situation of Roma and Sinti and the Lund recommendations, and to ensure that recommendations regarding political participation are being implemented accordingly. To ensure that Roma inclusion policies address the specific issues related to the participation of Roma women in politics, these measures should be properly budgeted, monitored, and assessed. To design and deliver training programs aimed at developing leadership skills of young Roma girls, with particular focus on civic education and education for democracy. To solve the political and legal nature of incompatibilities which will allow Roma mediators, most of them women, to run for local office and hold the local councillor mandate. To promote positive examples of successful Roma women which were and are engaged in political life. Roma women face a variety of obstacles within their community and in the broader society that limits their political engagement. Illiteracy, poverty, and lack of official jobs make Roma women an easy target of manipulation during electoral campaigns. The political mainstream parties invite Roma women to collect signatures and campaign for them, but they hesitate to include them in their list of candidates. Once the women agree to run, it is often difficult for them to get an electable spot on the list of candidates. High levels of endemic corruption and political instability are demotivating Roma women from participation in political life. They fear that political involvement may endanger the Roma community instead of bringing positive changes. Roma women witness that top 5 spots on district list of candidates are dominated by wealthy men with hidden interests. As a result, Roma women do not even have a chance to do the exercise of running for local office. However, there are signs of programs that I would like to share. For instance, during local elections in 2015, 2 Roma women won seats in local council. At that moment, only 1 woman exercises the local councillor mandate, and she works as a community mediator as well. Due to contradictions in Moldovan legislation, the position of Roma mediator is incompatible with local councillor mandate. As a result, the only Roma women local councillor is currently facing a court case. Thank you.
Thank you for your intervention and again for raising our awareness of the multi-layered discrimination impacting on the Roma women and youth. Next speaker on the floor will be Turnipe International Roma Youth Network, followed by NGO Anti-Fascist Human Rights League.
Thank you, Dan. Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Husseini and I'm here on behalf of Turnipe, which is International Roma Youth Network and also Roma Active Albania. Excellencies, I'm very honored to have the chance to speak in front of you about political participation of young Roma. Actually, regarding political participation of Roma and young Roma, they are excluded during elections campaigns. Political parties are not open to include Roma in their candidate list. Even in the cases when they add Roma on their candidate list, they put them in the end, so they are not elected. Mostly Roma are used by politicians to take their votes and to take their seat in the parliament, and then they don't even talk about the issues that the Roma community face. We recommend to involve Roma young people to be part of city councillors, members of the parliament, and also to be part of the decision making. On behalf of Turnipe, we appeal to politicians and policy makers to put the youth issue on the agenda, to include young people into decision-making processes, and also to strengthen the voice of Roma youth. Turnipe and its members encourages OCE countries to fight against discrimination and to support Roma participation and representation in the political sphere. Politicians in European Union, national and local level need to be more open to include Roma and young Roma in their political parties, because I can assure you that there will be a valuable asset and they will give a lot of contribution into your political parties, but also into the countries. Also, I have a recommendation regarding Roma politicians. Please, if you're elected, please do not work only for Roma. Please work nationally, because you are elected to represent your country. So you have to represent your country. If you are focused only on Roma issues, then you are not going to be elected again. So please, we need you there so you can give the contribution for the country, but also for the Roma community. And today is very important to see what has been done in your countries to improve the Roma inclusion. There is some states who have been supporting the integration of Roma, but there is still a long way to go and make sure that the Roma community is treated equally in society, have access in healthcare, education, housing, employment, and social protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Next speaker on the list, NGO Anti-Fascist Human Rights League, followed by Central Council of German, Sinti, and Roma.
Mr. Moderator, dear participants, the Anti-Fascist League monitors situations of violation of human rights in Ukraine, and unfortunately in Ukraine there are constant attacks on the Roma, and they are organized by members of neo-Nazi groups, and they in fact engage in Roma pogroms. They do this wearing Nazi symbols. They post results of their actions on their websites. They're very proud of these pogroms. And yet no criminal investigations are opened. The director of the Elena Berezhnaya Institute reminded us of the tragedy in 2018 in the Lvov Oblast when there was an attack on a Roma camp which resulted in the death of one Roma, 24 years old, and various others were wounded. And the criminal investigation ended with just 2 sentences that were very light indeed, suspended a suspended year and a half. In the central region of Kiev, neo-Nazis attacked another camp. They burned down some of the homes, and what did they have in mind? It wasn't clear, but they did post a lot of information about their action, and they're quite proud of what they did.
Of the session, which is access to and participation of Roma and Sinti in public and political life. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to say that they don't participate in socio-political life in Ukraine because the government claims that they have a closed tradition, they're not interested in any event, so they're not offered any possibility to register, to acquire citizenship. The government doesn't even believe that it has the duty to protect these people when they live on the territory of Ukraine. And we, as an anti-fascist league, we strongly object to the violent attacks on these individuals. The government doesn't guarantee their basic rights, the right to life, the right to be safe. And this occurs because of the presence of these neo-Nazi organizations that think it's okay to do away with gypsies because they're just trash anyway. The system just doesn't work. Law and order is not present. Such attacks are registered not under Article 161, which is a hate crime article, but rather under vandalism or hooliganism. And that just results in a very short prison sentence or a fine. So we would draw attention also to the fact that the European Parliament has adopted a resolution about the importance of the memory of gypsies in the history of Europe. So we believe that this neo-Nazi ideology needs to be combated in all of its forms on the territory of Ukraine. Thank you.
I pass the floor now to the next speaker on the list, Central Council of German Sinti and Roma, followed by Youth Council of the Municipality of Shuto-Orizari.
Thank you very much. This year on 2nd August, we commemorated the 75th anniversary of the day when the Nazis murdered the last 4,300 Sinti and Roma at the Auschwitz-Birkenau extermination camp. This day is recognized as the European Roma Holocaust Memorial Day to commemorate the 500,000 Sinti and Roma that were murdered in Nazi-occupied Europe. We call upon the OSCE and the participating states to fully recognize the Holocaust of Sinti and Roma, as well as to strengthen research, remembrance, and education related to it. This genocide should be equally addressed by the states, and Sinti and Roma representatives should fully participate during the commemoration activities for the International Holocaust Remembrance Day on 27th of January. Recognition and remembrance of the history of persecution and racism is a major step on the path towards the equal participation of Sinti and Roma. On August 7th, the same week, when we commemorated the European Roma Holocaust Memorial Day, the German media house Sat.1 broadcasted the pseudo-documentary Roma, People Between Poverty and Bragging, a film that represents Sinti and Roma in a disgusting and racist way. The production widely associates discriminated Roma communities with massive crime, and criminality is linked to ethnic origin. However, anti-Gypsyism is not just widespread in the media and other fields of public life, it is also visible in its structural form in the limited diversity and lack of representation and participation of Sinti and Roma in institutions and structures. Racist discourses, hate speech are a major obstacle to public participation of Sinti and Roma, creating an atmosphere that silences voices of Sinti and Roma communities. Such racist discourses are taken up in election campaigns, as we have documented in Germany, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, and Spain. Furthermore, the perpetuation of anti-Gypsyism in the mainstream media provokes hate speech on the internet, legitimizes hate and violence against minorities, and poses a great danger for the well-being of Sinti and Roma. In particular, the Central Council of German, Sinti and Roma demands that Sinti and Roma are participating in broadcasting councils and state media authorities of the participating states. While other racist ideologies receive increased attention in the online manifestation, anti-Gypsyism is rarely addressed. There is a lack of social awareness of anti-Gypsyist hate content, many stereotypes are reproduced unquestionably, and many false claims are widely accepted. Continued extensive monitoring is key to raising awareness and informing stakeholders, including decision makers, and increase the political will and mobilization of civil society and government institutions. The Central Council urges all participating states to fully implement the laws and international commitments to sanction any form of hate speech, racism, and anti-Gypsyism in the public discourse. The Central Council of German, Sinti and Roma calls on the OSCE participating states to monitor and intervene against anti-Gypsyism in media and as online hate speech. The OSCE and the participating states need to recognize anti-Gypsyism in order to successfully progress the implementation of the OSCE Action Plan for improving the situation of Sinti and Roma. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your intervention, and special thanks to Central Council for lending us the Roma Holocaust exhibition, which is hosted in the premises of ODIHR on the hallway. Next speaker on the list, Youth Council of the Municipality of Šuto-Rizari, followed by Czech Republic.
Dear Excellencies, as we know, politics is a necessary element in a society for maintenance of the social harmony in the state. So when we think about the challenges that Roma and Sinti have to face, we need to consider the complexity of a modern world evolution and ongoing processes of globalization, unification, and the rising of the national parties everywhere. The opportunities for Roma and Sinti to engage in governance and to participate in political and decision-making processes are depending largely on the political, socio-economic, and cultural context where social norms in many parts of the world results in multiple forms of discrimination. So Roma and Sinti are restricted in their political activities and actions due to the party's reluctance to renew and maintain the political capacity. But fortunately, at the local level, things are starting slowly to change. Right now, I speak as the president of the first local youth council of the Šuto-Rizari, the only one Roma municipality in the world where we have made the decision under the law of local self-government to initiate the procedure of formation of this youth council, where we have the support of municipality, our Roma mayor, and of course the OSCE. And hopefully that we will make youth initiatives that will bring better changes for our community. Also, the focus of Roma and Sinti in the terms of the engagement in the political arena is a priority, particularly in the light of recent events and democratic transitions in the Western Balkans as well in the other regions. A strengthened, coordinated, and effective OSCE action is essential to achieve the overall goal of progressive and substantive inclusion of Roma and Sinti in political and decision-making processes at all levels. So in order to reach this long-term objective through the definition of OSCE, through the OSCE action plan on improving the situation of Roma and Sinti, we need to take focus on two main recommendations in the area of political inclusion. The first is to support the young people's participation in inclusive political processes and democratic practices, and covering the wider enabling environment and individual capacity building, of course, with specific focus of the Roma and Sinti. Also to make the promotion of young people's skills and capacities in order to participate actively in the democratic practices, including in local, national, and EU processes. Also to support effective participation of the Roma and Sinti in EU governance and decision-making processes. Also to have the ability to, for the Roma and Sinti to contribute to the achievement of the durable solutions for peace-building initiatives. Therefore, to enable the Roma and Sinti to become the active leaders in European efforts in order to achieve sustainable human development as a long-term investment. In the end, I will say that this will help to develop a critical mass of Roma and Sinti and will create a networking among the young people thereby to put more pressure on the institutions that are concerned, also to have bigger employment at public institutions, and to have a mainstreaming of the youth. Young Roma and Sinti can be creative force, a dynamic source of innovation, and we can participate, contribute, and even catalyze the important changes in political system, power sharing dynamics, and economic opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention and for the recommendations. I pass the floor to the next speaker on the list, which is Czech Republic, followed by Italy.
Thank you for the floor. Mr. Moderator, the Czech Republic fully aligns itself with the Chapter 6 of the OSCE Action Plan and supports Roma participation in public and political life. Institutional arrangements for Roma integration and participation in the Czech Republic continue their work. In the meetings of the Government Council for Roma Minority Affairs, many topics and steps connected with Roma integration are discussed between representatives of central government, local government, and the Roma minority. All regions continue to have a coordinator for Roma affairs who are methodically guided and financially supported by the Office of the Government. Major municipalities shall also employ a Roma advisor at the municipal level. In order to strengthen existing arrangements for Roma inclusion and participation and to encourage self-organization of Roma, the Office of the Government, as the National Roma Contact Point, implemented the project activation and empowerment of Roma stakeholders by the National Roma Platform in years 2016 and 2018. The ambition of the project was to empower Roma personalities to become partners for local, regional, and national public authorities. Thanks to project implementation, we were able to activate many Roma with whom we are still in contact. Several participants in project activities have already been successfully involved in the activities of advisory bodies of the Government Council for Roma Minority Affairs. With the financial support of the Norwegian Financial Mechanism 2014 and 2021, we are currently starting a new program addressing empowerment and engagement of Roma at the local level. By the end of this year, calls for proposals will be open for municipalities, Roma and pro-Roma NGOs. The call for municipalities will be focused on capacity building of Roma advisors involved in policy making and also empowerment of Roma advisor to contribute to the implementation of the Roma integration strategy at the local level. The call for Roma and pro-Roma NGOs shall support development of Roma platforms at the local and regional level and support them to be actively involved in local and regional politics. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Next speaker on the list is Italy, followed by Germany.
Thank you very much for the floor, Mr. Chairman.
In addition to the statement previously made on behalf of the European Union, we would like to add a few considerations on a national basis. The UNAR, the UNAR, our National Office to Combat Racial Discrimination, as the national contact point in Italy for the national strategy to include Roma, Sinti, and Camminanti, or RSC, for the period 2012-2020, coordinates actions in 4 areas of intervention: housing, health, education, and labor. This on the basis of a gender-sensitive approach and the cross-cutting principle of non-discrimination. Now, despite some positive results with the overall implementation of the strategy, there still are various critical or weak aspects due in part to the prevalent negative sentiment in the country concerning the Romani minority. Without a change in the attitudes within the majority of the population, any program to improve the situation of the Roma is destined to fail. Consequently, understanding that anti-Gypsyism, a term that includes a specific form of intolerance and racism vis-à-vis Roma and Sinti, as a main obstacle for the full inclusion of the Romani community, in the last few years, the UNAR has devoted a lot of attention to the theme of combating stereotypes and prejudice that characterizes the majority population, seeking to promote awareness and empowerment of the young generation with the specific objective of creating informal networks and providing instruments for the combating of discrimination. Nevertheless, anti-gypsyism is not just a topical problem, but it has historic roots characterized by suffering and persecution, culminating in the tragedy of the genocide during the Second World War. For this reason, convinced that there is a close link between the poor understanding of this minority and the prejudice to which it is subject, UNAR has opened a memory route that describes the salient times and places related to the Paraimos and to persecution and Europe. Paraimos is a word in the Romanes language referring to the persecution and extermination of about 500,000 Roma and Sinti during the Nazi-fascist period. And its memory, the memory of the Paraimos, is of fundamental importance for the social and cultural recognition of this minority, with a view to reducing the high level of anti-Gypsyism that characterizes our society. And now, within the framework of this project, numerous events have been organized on the occasion of the main dates related to the memory of and resistance to persecution, 16 May, 2 August, 27 January, with public and in-depth remembrance of the theme of Roma and Sinti deportation and internment in Italy, and also a memorial trip to Krakow, Auschwitz, culminating in participation in the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of segregation and extermination of Roma and Sinti in the Zigeunerlager on 2 August 1945. Now, without the remembrance and recognition of the Paraimos, it will be difficult to reduce the extent of anti-Gypsy feelings. On the basis of this experience, UNAR considers it a priority within the framework of a new strategy for RSC inclusion to make a specific effort to gain understanding of the community's history and culture, of the ways it has contributed to European culture, of the tragic stories of persecution, and of how to eliminate anti-Gypsyism. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your recommendations. Next speaker on the floor will be Germany, followed by European Roma grassroots organizations, Ergo Network.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Zunächst vielen Dank an den slowakischen Vorsitzenden.
Thank you very much to the Slovak chairmanship for underscoring the importance of this topic, a topic that is at the heart of our discussions today. Our deliberations so far have shown that various OSCE commitments incorporate the issue of Roma and Sinti. Nonetheless, we've also pinpointed the problems which persist. In Germany, protecting minorities is a top priority. We believe that it is in our interests to bolster social cohesion. Thereby, we can also strengthen our democracy. As for the topic at hand, I want to focus on the following: the participation of Roma in politics. In Germany, we have a dialogue forum involving the authorities and national minorities. Civil society organizations representing Roma and Sinti take part in this dialogue forum at various levels. For instance, every year in the German Bundestag, there's a thematic debate. National minorities, including Roma and Sinti organizations, take part in these discussions, exchanging with members of the Bundestags. In 2015, we set up an advisory council on Roma and Sinti issues within the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Germany. It is not only Roma and Sinti representatives working in that body. There are also members of the Bundestag, representatives of the government, of the Bundesländer, and also youth activists. The fight against the stigmatization of and discrimination against Roma and Sinti is becoming increasingly important. It is a priority for us, both domestically and in our foreign policy. Germany has taken it upon itself to effectively combat anti-Gypsyism as a specific form of racism. At the start of this year, we established an independent commission on combating anti-Gypsyism. This is a commission within the government, and what it does is the following. It has set itself the objective of studying the reasons underpinning anti-gypsy sentiment in society, to come up with the strategies for combating this sentiment and issue recommendations to the Parliament and to the government. The federal government is awaiting the findings of the thematic report, which should be published in 2021. The main objective is to combat anti-gypsyism in public discourse, in society as a whole, and also in our Parliament. We hope that the Commission will do an excellent job, and we're happy to see it already up and running. Aside from that, we're also taking part in various programs aimed at combating anti-gypsyism, providing funding, as we believe it is in everyone's interests to ensure social cohesion, ensure social inclusion, which is one of the pillars of democracy.
Next speaker will be European Roma Grassroots Organizations Network, followed by Asociația Comunitară a Romilor din Coastei.
Thank you. A public and political participation is a human right. Committing to the empowerment of a systematically disempowered social group to achieve equal participation in various societal and political affairs would play a crucial role in advancing democratic governance, the rule of law, and socio-economic development. Since Ergo Network firmly believes that Roma leadership and participation contribute to mitigating the imperfections of democracy and to bringing a fairer representation, we call upon the OSCE participating states to develop measures with direct Roma empowerment as an objective and address empowerment as a multidimensional social process that helps people gain control over their own lives, use and enhance their capacities to shape their communities and their society by acting on issues that they find as important. To envision and foster quality participation at all levels and all stages of policymaking, by establishing protocols, specific protocols for each stage of a policy process. To develop national policies addressing Roma participation, including it in administrative personnel at all levels. Different opportunities, such as internship, traineeship, and employment opportunities, should be created for young Roma, especially overcoming ethnic and gender gaps in employment. Importantly, the future policies should offer more systematic solutions related to employment of Roma in public sector to counter the trend of employing Roma only for the duration of the Roma-related projects. To develop indicators to measure the frequency and quality of Roma participation and leadership. Participation and leadership are a policy matter and can be measured by using both quantitative and qualitative indicators. Finally, to contribute to diversifying Roma participation while embracing and understanding that besides women's and youth issues, Roma women and youth have diverse expertise and should also occupy high-level positions. The same understanding should be applied to other social groups on the intersection of different categories of difference, such as sexuality, class, disability, geographical location. Marginalized groups representation affects other people in similar positions to get more confidence to voice their needs. Considering its extensive experience in participating in policy-making processes, Ergo Network is of a position that Roma participation results in appearance of important early warnings, a greater knowledge production, problem-solving capacity, and quicker learning. A challenge is that Roma participation has been acknowledged to some extent, much greater extent than Roma leadership. Yet it is not a powerful enough policy objective and tool used by the OSCE participating states. In addition, while acknowledging that there have been developments regarding the ladder climbing from non-participation to tokenism, Roma are exceptionally rarely on the level of citizen control. Roma leadership is a precondition for pursuing diverse form of quality participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker on the list is Asociația Comunitară a Romilor din Coastei, followed by European Center for Anti-Ziganism Research.
Hello, dear participants and delegation. My name is Linda, and I'm from Romania, from Cluj-Napoca. And first of all, I want to thank everyone for making possible this meeting. I recommend that Romania and the other countries to recognize Roma like a minority, not like a vulnerable group, not like poor people. I recommend that Roma youth to be included in the political party and in the government, because to change something we need to have political power. Nobody can tell us anymore we don't have education, because you know all, we have teenagers, they have education to high level. I recommend special from Romania to change the abusive law that asks to collect 200,000 signatures from the citizen if you want to make a new party, because it's impossible to collect that kind of number of signatures on the street from the people. I talk about my experience this year. I was running from the election to the European election. I was the head on the list. I am in a new party. It's called Demos, Democracy and Solidarity. But we couldn't imagine to collect the 2,000 signatures that Romania asked for us. That's why I said this law is abusive, because they didn't allow to new people to get in political, especially Roma people. If you see, we didn't have a party, we didn't have for example, in Cluj, I know Hungarian people, they are recognized like a minority, and they have their own party. They have a place to the city hall. They have everything. But we Roma, we don't have anything, because first of all, we have to be accepted like a minority, because we are in whole Europe, in the whole world, there are Roma people who are living. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your intervention. I pass the floor now to European Center for Anti-Tsiganism Research, followed by Kyrgyzstan.
Thank you for the floor. Dear ladies, dear gentlemen, honorable members, honorable ambassadors, let me start with my recommendations. Cities and regions need to include Roma leaders into inclusion councils, so that those issues can be handled on the ground where they happen. There is need to be installed a Roma as a commissioner to the European Commission. The anti-Tsiganism must be tackled on all levels of society, from the local over the national to the international. Roma need to be strengthened in their positive identity, so they have the power to fight against anti-Tsiganism. The OSCE action plan need to be implemented, even if it got yellowed after 15, 16 years. Most of the problems we have can be tackled if this document is finally getting implemented completely in all member states. Political parties should grant Roma and Sinti quotas for electoral places. Roma should be supported in parties because of their expertise and not because they can play some gypsy music. The participation in political and public life is a difficult one. Roma and Sinti who are successful in education and working life are mostly living undercover. They do not out themselves as member of the minority because they are afraid of the anti-Tsiganistic prejudice that will pop up in the minds of the majority society. This is a sadly reality of Roma life in Europe. The Roma do this to protect their chances in life and for the families. Anti-Tsiganism has to be understood as an instrument of stigmatization whose intent is not to observe and understand the circumstances of the other side, but to find elements of identification that legitimate separation and other discriminative actions against those others. Anti-Tsiganism is utterly freely and unfiltered by the majority society. This is apparently a declaration of enemy status within society that can be felt mentally as well as physically by the Roma and Sinti population. Roma issues do nearly never appearing or existing on political agendas of parties. Instead, they start to appear as a problem that needs to be solved by the right-wing parties. Only Roma and Sinti themselves can place topic into parties. After 5 years active membership in the Green parties, I was able to place the topics of anti-Tsiganism and deportation in the Green agenda in Germany on the local and national level, as well as on the European level through the European Parliament. Now I'm a member of the Social Democratic Party in Germany after I have been invited by them. I will candidate to get to the Parliament of the city-state of Hamburg in February 2020. Roma and Sinti should get more involved into the existing party systems. I do not see that it's a good idea to create Roma parties. We don't need to build an own car. It's enough if we participate into the existing structures. Even in Germany, there are only a handful of activists in political life. In every party except of the Alternative for Germany. Quotas for Roma participation of Roma and Sinti should be a huge change in the democratic parties to get more voters and Roma participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your recommendations, as well as for reminding us all of the importance and relevance of the OSCE Action Plan on Roma and Sinti adopted in Maastricht 2003. Next speaker is Kyrgyzstan, followed by Center for Education and Human Rights.
Good morning, and thank you, moderator, for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about this subject before other participants. In the Kyrgyzstan Republic, we have a group, an ethnic group called Lula. They're often referred to as gypsies, according to current data. In the Republic of Kyrgyzstan, we have 3,645 Lula people, most of them in the south, and there are some 750 households. About half of the population is male, half is female. There's some 560 children. Now, state bodies provide them with assistance to register, to obtain social services. 45 of the families receive social assistance, and 140 individuals are gainfully employed. It is a small ethnic group, but it has its cultural specificity, its traditions, its customs. That they live together, close to one another. Many of them are unemployed. Mostly they work in agriculture. Others work as hired labor in the building sector, in the construction sector. And the Lule, women also are in the scrap metal sector. And there is an incomplete secondary school. There is a healthcare clinic which provides medical care to members of this community. Now, it should be noted that 986 children are registered in the school, but there is a problem with school attendance. Parents often don't allow their children to go to schools, but there are some positive examples as well. Some members of this diaspora have completed university education. They have become members of the local parliament, highly placed officials in the local government. We have some Lule who are school teachers. And more Lule parents are interested in their children going to school because they see the positive impact. There is a special social fund for the Lule. Now, we provide all possible conditions for such organizations to function. This foundation, it's a social foundation. So there is an integration process to make sure that individuals of various ethnic groups can be integrated with the society as a whole on a mutually advantageous basis. So I would like to thank the OSCE for this opportunity to speak to this subject, and I hope that we can cooperate on it fruitfully and constructively in the future.
All of the importance of civil registration as a prerequisite for accessing public services and being able to participate in public and political life. Next speaker on the floor will be Center for Education and Human Rights, followed by Spain's National Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I will start by congratulating the ODIHR, the contact point for Roma and Sinti, on the third status reports. That is giving us the overview, where do we stand with the implementation of the OSCE Action Plan on Roma and Sinti. And one of the key messages of the status report is saying to us that very little has been done at the level of the member states, the participating states, to fulfill their pledge for the improving the situation of Roma and Sinti. On the contrary, in some area there are very regressing situation instead of progressing. Now, coming to the subject of our session today, Roma and Sinti participation. It was, I remember from the very beginning, one of the key issues that participating states and the international organization was trying to address. How to make sure that Roma are full participants. They are playing an active role in the definition of their issue, but also in the implementation phase. Back in 2001, I remember the high-level conference hosted by the Romanian presidency in Bucharest. The title of that event, it was From Words to Facts. So even, I think it was 18 years ago, when before the initiative of the OSCE to elaborate the action plan. 2 years later, we have the outcome of the action plan adopted by the council member, ministerial council decision 544. And we are at already third status report that is showing us that very little has been done. Now, one of the recommendations and the key message of my intervention is what went wrong and what are the lessons on this? Why we are not progressing? What are the barriers? And one of the key messages is actually that we are not doing enough to mobilize the public support of the mainstream society. Because the critical opposition that comes from whatever policy we are having in place at national level comes actually from the mainstream society. So the recommendation that I try to search in the previous year, what we are lacking, it's exactly this. Governments, participating states should increase their activities to mobilize public support and involve members of mainstream society in favor, in supporting the integration, in supporting the improving of living condition of different Roma and Sinti communities. Without having these policymakers and politicians, they are very reluctant to take steps, to do something which goes against the public opinion. In some countries, for example, over 70% of the mainstream population, they don't want to have Roma as neighbors. And this shows a lot about the acceptance. So I urge the participating states to take a priority zone of investment to mobilize public support from the mainstream society. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much for your intervention and for the recommendations. Next speaker will be Spain's National Congress, followed by Radio Patrin News Network.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Ismael Cortés, member of the Spanish Parliament with the political party Unidas Podemos and Como Podem. I would like to call on the competent OSCE institutions responsible for democracy and equal participation to commit on the following 4 top priorities when it comes to the Roma and Sinti participation in elections. The first one, to increase the visibility of Roma and Sinti citizens in electoral census. Still, in many countries, Roma and Sinti are underrepresented in the census, and in some countries are not represented at all. Second, to focus on political education for Roma and Sinti citizens in order to get clear understanding on the rights, both as voters and also as potential candidates. Third, to promote and monitor the inclusion of Roma candidates in electoral lists. And four, to support Roma candidates by including them in different political forums, whether they are organized by media corporations, intergovernmental organizations, or civil society networks. I also would like to call on the Spanish competent authorities to foster a meaningful involvement of Roma citizens in political structures. To my understanding, a good model to follow up would be the quota system that enables women participation. And I will give an example. If we look back to the late 80s, the percentage of women in the National Congress was up to 5%. Since 2007, with the adoption of the gender equality law, some parties decided to apply parity criteria to electoral lists. Such a measure has led to restructuring the composition of parties' leadership, parliamentary committees, and executive cabinets. The result, today, women MPs represent 47% of the National Congress, and women ministers constitute 65% of the current National Council of Ministers. In Spain, the last electoral cycle in April and May embraced local, regional, national, and European levels. Only 0.1% of the overall candidates were from Roma background. On the other hand, some estimates say that the Roma represent around 5% of the national population. As you can see, these figures show a clear disparity or asymmetry between the Roma citizens and their non-Roma fellows in accessing democratic power structures. In sociological terms, integration is a problematic concept, as we know. Nevertheless, in political terms, integration should be rather thought as a set of inclusive decision-making processes aimed to fight against exclusion and to promote equal participation, making sure that no one is left behind when we, as a society, perform any kind of progress. Thank you very much for your attention.
And I thank you very much for your recommendations. I will pass the floor to next speaker, Radio Patrin News Network, followed by Russian Federation.
Mr. Chair, good morning. I'm saying good morning because I'm look like just waking up from 1994 when we have been making very seed and strong activity to have contact point for Roma and Sinti as well. To go on with the cooperation of the OSCE for us was an incredible momentum in the political life of Romani movement. And at this very moment, I believe that Mr. Jacek Palashevsky, who was ambassador at that time, he was so much supportive. But when I said good morning, it looked like that I see this kind of atmosphere that I don't like. We were so much flagging, so much in a fire of helping Romani communities. Helping Romani communities is not only to help Roma, but it is to help society. The ambassadors of the participating states, the representatives of the ODIHR and CPRCI, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, I'm not so much enthusiastic today than I was in the year of 1994, when we Roma and Sinti activists, in cooperation with the support from OSCE, organized so-called Standing Conference of Roma and Sinti. Actually, we together with OSCE planted the seed of the CPRCI. And as I mentioned, Ambassador Palashevsky was like in the front with Nikolai Georgiev, Rudko Kavchinsky, and others. And the future, we had the seed to make a good institutional document of the OSCE called Action Plan on Improving of the Situation of Roma and Sinti within OSCE area. I am flagging, and I am the man who doesn't give up. Please, the action plan should serve OSCE much more to do. It was a grandiose step to have such a document. in weaving together in the modern political history of the Romani communities, both at the member states of the OSCE, in domestic and internationally, fight democratic crises that are today existing. In doing so, I'm asking to include much more, much better, the Roma citizens. That's why we Roma, OSCE, and Roma again, we need to expand and to have a deeper conversation and to continue best practices. The action plan have various experiences. That's why I'm definitely recalling to widely and urgently read both action plan and third status report. Reading 2 OSCE grant documents, I meant to get into the implementation and constitute essentials to fight anti-Romani sentiments, preserving democracy, and stronger intention to reinforce implementation of the participating states and relevant OSCE institutions. Specifically, much more to empower CPRC and structures aimed to ensuring that the Roma and Sinti people take a full and equal part in OSCE member states. Today, the CPRCI should be more empowered, and as such a body could be the engine, and as a fact of the matter, build and make possible that Roma citizens within society build multi-ethnic democracy in which no particular ethnic group in the majority, and where political and social equality and economies empower the democracy in societies where Roma live. Thank you very much.
And I thank you very much for your recommendations, as well as for the brief insight into the history of participation of Roma activists within the OSCE processes. Next on the list is Russian Federation, followed by Amnesty International Ukraine.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, dear colleagues, the Roma and Sinti representatives in recent years continue to be one of the most vulnerable ethnic groups in the area of the OSCE. In many countries of Europe, there is a deliberate policy of marginalization and discrimination of gypsies. Their rights to education are not respected. They are deprived of access to medical care, normal employment. The great majority live below the poverty line. In many countries of Europe, women, men, and children from the gypsy population fall into a risk zone as potential victims of human trafficking for labor and sexual exploitation, as victims of hate crimes as well. Now, despite the fact that in the OSCE and many other international organizations, there are a lot of recommendations and obligations developed also by specialized non-governmental organizations, a very small percentage of Roma and Sinti children are fully included in the education process. In member states of the EU, about half of them do not receive secondary education, which is obligatory for all in accordance with Sustainable Development Goal number 4. Now, in the Russian Federation, we have 193 ethnic nationalities. When it comes to gypsies living in our territory, we're 7th in the world by percentage. Today in Russia, there are civil society organizations of gypsies at the regional and federal levels. These organizations are very important as a means of implementing the state nationalities policy. The government of Russia has adopted a second and is preparing on a third overall plan for the socioeconomic and ethnocultural development of gypsies living on the territory of the Russian Federation. Children of the gypsy group are integrated in the education system when required. If they have difficulties in dealing with the general educational program or difficulties with social adaptation, they are provided with psychological, medical, and social support. Now, there are more and more publications in the gypsy language, and it's important to produce teaching materials for early school in the mother tongue. We are working on the development of a unified alphabet and spelling in the gypsy dialects. And the very important role at the federal level is played by the Union of Civil Society Gypsy Organizations. There is a special conceptual document on the education of ethnic gypsies, and it takes into consideration the cultural model of gypsies and their linguistic specificity. There is a intercultural Russo-Gypsy communication document which includes the grammar of the Gypsy language on the basis of the Lovar dialect. There are school documents produced in the Russian language and the Lovar and Kelderar dialects. There is also a special work setting out a unified alphabet of the Gypsy language. Now, but unfortunately, there are more and more attacks on Gypsy communities in Ukraine. Just in 2018, 6 major pogroms have occurred. There may have been many more, but those are the ones that the media paid attention to. Now, unfortunately, representatives of the forces of law and order just do not interfere when that occurs. Yes, I've almost finished. Similar problems also arise in Latvia, Lithuania, and other member states of the EU. In closing, I would like to state that the issue of protecting Gypsies' rights is something that is constantly being dealt with in the OSCE. Yes, thank you very much. We will distribute the full version of our statement. Thank you for your attention.
Intervention, and I would kindly remind that in OSCE and in many of the other intergovernmental organizations, the formal terminology uses the term Roma and Sinti. Thank you. The next speaker on the floor, Amnesty International Ukraine, followed by Anti-Discrimination Center Memorial.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Alona Kazanska, and as a Roma youth activist of the Amnesty International Ukraine, I would like to ask you to pay your attention to the status of Romani girls and women within the action frame of the Istanbul Convention, the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence. And I would like to appeal to the Ukrainian government about, first, to ensure that Roma inclusion policy will include gender-sensitive criteria within the status of Romani girls and women in the Roma community and main society, to address intersectional discrimination and rising violence risk within the multiple identity, gender, ethnicity, religion, etc. grounds, to ensure the ratification process of the Istanbul Convention. And I speak here and now as a young Roma activist. What does it mean to be an activist and Romani woman? It's a balance between a few different identities. As Romani girl, woman within the Roma patriarchal family model, as an equal member of civil society, as a human rights activist, Romani girl, woman would stand against intersectional discrimination and different forms of hatred. I want you to imagine yourself as an island near between different big mainlands. Being young Roma activist to a girl, woman means inclusion in the human rights movement, civil rights movement, and Roma rights movement at the same time. It's also important to pay attention to academic research on this topic, on the status of Romani women in different forms of social life. One of the good examples would be academic research in gender and society, the Romani women's movement, struggles and debates in Central and Eastern Europe. In conclusion, many OSCE participating states have gender equality and Roma inclusion policies. One of the sensitive parts of these frameworks are empowering women and girls from unrepresented groups, participation in public life, and play an equal role in decision process within the main society and within Roma communities. The policy development process should be based on research. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Next speaker on the floor will be Anti-Discrimination Center Memorial, followed by Spain.
Thank you very much. I want to talk about the situation of the Roma in the Russian Federation. There is no program aimed at integrating the Roma, a program which could incorporate key issues on which people's health and lives hinge. At the highest level, in fact, at the level of the president, negative stereotypes are vehiculated. The only support the government provides is support for Roma dance and music festivals, although we have many pressing issues, such as inclusion in public life, legalization of property, education, and stamping out segregation. For many years now, the Roma in Russia have been unable to legalize their property. They haven't been able to get access to gas, water, electricity. Tens of schools in areas heavily populated by Romas, there are so-called gypsy classes, says the speaker, where educational standards are not being upheld. We've been monitoring the situation, and we've seen that Roma votes have been traded. They've been sold and bought in elections. There have been several instances of domestic disputes spilling over into ethnic confrontation. All of this resulted in anti-Roma attacks, which involved the use of violence. The village of Chmadanovska, for instance, in the Penzen region. There was a domestic dispute which resulted in tragedies. Anti-Roma demonstrations were organized, and 900 Roma were forced to flee from their homes. In fact, after such incidents occur, Roma are the only ones at whom the finger of blame is pointed. There have been many other instances of Roma settlements having been attacked and the Roma fleeing, with the law enforcement authorities doing nothing. In the Khakassia region, people petitioned the courts to try and get the Roma to leave. They tried to get the courts to recognize that the Roma settlements were illegally built. The courts thankfully ruled in favor of the Roma. The Russian Federation must do more to integrate the Roma. It must put an end to aggressive action and begin taking constructive steps to fix the situation. It should listen to what the UN, the Council of Europe, and the OSCE have to say, specifically the Maastricht Plan of Action. The issue of violence targeting Roma in Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine will be the topic of a side event starting at 1:15 p.m. in Room 1. Everyone who's interested is invited. Turning now to the Mugat, or Jugi, or the Loli, or the Central Asian Roma. A few words about them. We welcome the fact that the government of the Kyrgyz Republic has recognized that the Mugat people living in Kyrgyzstan are facing challenges, and this population has now been incorporated into the National Plan of Action, which was drafted following the UN's Committee Against Discrimination's recommendations. We call on all to follow in Kyrgyzstan's footsteps and to follow their stellar example. Thank you.
Remind all participating states that because we are coming close to concluding with the speakers list, we are waiting for expression of using of the right of reply. Please liaise with my colleagues. Next speaker on the list, Spain, followed by Portugal.
Muchas gracias, señor moderador.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. The historical issue of the Roma people has left in its wake a whole host of issues preventing the Roma from taking part in public and political life. Although Roma should technically enjoy full electoral rights in our country, we do have some problems. We need to achieve effective participation of the Roma in political life and in public life without any trace of discrimination. They need to be able to vote, to become members of the government, to stand for office. Spain hasn't had Roma as members of parliament for a number of years, but now we do have such members, 4 of them, and we can now say that we have moved from words to action. So we have 4 Roma MPs, 2 men and 2 women. this is substantial progress as regards the representation of the Roma people. But of course, a lot remains to be done. I heard earlier that someone suggested introducing a system of quotas, and I will be circulating this proposal, sending it to the government, although I know chances are very slim of this proposal being put into practice, as each party chooses its own candidates. A lot has been done in Spain to improve Roma inclusion in public life. There's a national strategy for social inclusion, targeting the Roma population, covering the period 2012-2020. Nonetheless, despite all of these efforts, the Roma remain marginalized in economic and social terms. They cannot fully partake in the working of society. The programs we run for Roma brings together financial and technical means so as to try to overcome these challenges. The state, of course, participates in this process, and the Roma also participate at the state level, at the regional level. A lot remains to be done, as I said, in order to achieve equality, but what we're very concerned about is school dropout rates, especially when it comes to compulsory education. Of course, there are many Roma students in secondary education, in tertiary education, universities, which is wonderful, as it attests to the fact that we have improved conditions to allow Roma to participate in public and political life. I have a little bit of time left. I'll talk about young Roma. Now, this issue was flagged up here at the OSCE and also elsewhere. Spain currently holds the chairmanship of the Group of Friends for Youth and Safety. Generally, we meet in Rome. We meet in Vienna. We adopt priorities covering various topics such as human rights. And I would like to thank the Slovak chairmanship, as our Slovak chairmanship convened a forum on the issue in late October. Also, the OSCE Secretary General has been casting this topic in the limelight, and I'm very grateful for that. Thank you.
Speakers on the list is Portugal, and after that we will proceed with offering the floor for right of reply to a number of 6 participating states. Portugal, you have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, for giving me the floor. We align ourselves with the EU statement delivered by Romania. However, we would like to add a few remarks in our national capacity. Roma communities have lived in Portugal for more than 500 years. Despite progress in recent years, high levels of discrimination, poverty, and social exclusion remain. Perhaps more worrying is the continued mistrust between Roma and non-Roma people. Such situation demands a solid, coherent, and cross-cutting answer, contributing to the strengthening of social cohesion. Portugal adopted in 2013 and recently revised the National Roma Communities Integration Strategy. Ministries, civil society organizations, Roma communities, and experts were involved in the drafting of this strategy, aiming at the improvement of schooling, professional integration, and living conditions of Roma people, as well as placing the relevance of Roma integration higher up in the political and public agenda. In fact, besides the 4 main areas proposed by the European Commission, housing, education, health, and employment, the national strategy added a cross-cutting pillar in order to address issues like discrimination, mediation, citizenship, gender equality, Roma history, and culture. The strategy was extended until 2022. There is also the National Roma Communities Integration Strategy Support Fund, aiming to finance projects to combat discrimination of Roma communities and support their integration. Finally, let us emphasize the particular conditions of Roma women, whose specific needs are acknowledged by the aforementioned national strategy, as well as by the National Strategy for Equality and Non-Discrimination. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your intervention. We will proceed now to offer the opportunity for rights of reply. First on the list is Albania for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make some brief remarks on Roma and Sinti issues, but I know that the minutes here are not enough to express what we have done and what we still have to do regarding them. Albanian government is committed to make its utmost to improve the overall situation of Roma and Egyptian population in the country and to promote their inclusion into society. The Albanian government has adopted a national action plan for the integration of Roma and Egyptians for the period 2016-2020. The action plan was prepared through an inclusive process with the representatives of civil society and other ministries. One of the strategic areas of this action plan is housing and urban integration of Roma and Egyptian communities. The efforts of Albanian state through the years is fighting gender discrimination and the undertaking of continuous engagement to promote and achieve in practice the rights of women and girls, especially the position of Roma women, with the aim of making gender equality a reality, are translated in measures as follows. Consistent harmonization of the domestic legislation with the international standards by amending existing laws, drafting and implementation of the national strategies and its action plans, establishment and empowering of state structures which support gender equality and fight against violence against women and domestic violence, raise the awareness of public opinion with the aim of changing gender stereotypes through various awareness-raising campaigns. Regarding the participation in public life, in recent years, young girls, Egyptian and Roma women, are starting to be an active part of civil society, and the number of youth and Roma and Egyptians come aided undertaking banks, but not only. Regarding the education, terms of raising the level of education of Roma children is in progress, and it is reflected in the data from the Ministry of Education. Regarding the health, Ministry of Health organizes periodically through the country promotional activities and for child care, nutrition, family planning. Understandably, the successful implementation of above documents represented a difficult task, especially in terms of resources and interdepartmental coordination. Aware of the challenges persisting in these aspects, the government has put the issue of the implementation on the above-mentioned strategy at the forefront of its work agenda. In this regard, Albania stands ready to continue its existing cooperation with ODIHR and OSCE presence in Albania. Thank you.
I thank you, and I would kindly suggest all participating states for the incoming session to use the opportunity of registering themselves on the list and speak, and use the right of reply to react to what's being said. Thank you. Next is Romania, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. We wish to exercise our right of reply to the statements made during this session by a representative of the Asociația Culturală a Romilor din Coastei, and we wish to state the following. First, Roma are recognized as a national minority in Romania. The Romanian Constitution fully recognized that the Roma, along with another 18 national minorities, and they fully exercise their cultural, linguistic, political, and civil rights according to the international legal framework for the protection of the right of persons belonging to national minorities. Second, I would like to mention that the Roma are represented in the Romanian parliament in this moment. We have 2 deputies. Following 2016 the local election, members of the Roma political parties were elected at the local level. We have 1 mayor and 253 local councillors representing Roma local communities. The Prime Minister appointed a state councillor for Roma issues in July 2017. Also, the position as president of National Agency for Roma, as a central government institution for Roma. There is a strong representation of Roma within the national agencies and governmental institutions at high level. We highly appreciate that the newly established mainstream political party is promoting candidates from minorities groups such as Roma, LGBT, and disabled persons, and we deeply value their activity and recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on the list is Slovakia. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. I would like to exercise rights of reply to the remarks of the US delegation. Improving the situation of Roma minority has been a long-term priority of the Slovak government, which is in line with its OSCE 2019 chairmanship. Slovak authorities are fully aware of this task as well as of persisting shortcomings which need to be addressed urgently. One of the global objectives of the Slovak Republic strategy for Roma integration by 2020 is to aim to eliminate multiple discrimination against women and reduce gender inequalities in private and public life of marginalized Roma communities, and to promote the economic independence of Roma women through gender. Equality support activities in cooperation with non-governmental organizations working on gender equality. The strategy of the Slovak Republic for the integration of Roma by 2020 also contains several objectives to increase gender equality in all areas covered. The Slovak law amendment of 2014 was not intended to impose any penalty, including financial ones. Rather, the intention was to act as discouragement in cases when Roma women leaving hospitals without permission in the best interest of the child and the mother, and with the aim to protect the health of mothers and children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor now to Hungary. Please, you have the floor.
Mr. Moderator, there is a strong connection between education level and active citizenship, active participation in public and political life. Since the Hungarian education system has been mentioned previously, I would like to add more information on education measures that help social inclusion of disadvantaged and Roma students, prevent dropouts, and aim to ensure that every child can get professional, mature, and graduation. Since in 2015, the Hungarian government extended the compulsory kindergarten age from 5 to 3 years. Early warning and pedagogical support system has been developed in 2016 to fight against dropout. Free school book available from the first grade up to 9th grade for every pupils. Free meals in kindergarten schools and during holidays are available. The Hungarian government improved low-performing schools as well. Higher salary for teachers who are applying inclusive teaching methods with socially disadvantaged children and students were introduced in 2019. Primary school districts have been regulated in 2017, and other legislative changes had been made in order to prevent segregation. Social workers and child care professionals in school were needed. It was a pilot program and it started in 2016 and extended in 2018. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next right of reply comes from Bulgaria, followed by Ukraine.
Excuse me just one second. Mr. Moderator, responding to the statement made by the US and some representatives of NGOs, I would like to reiterate that Bulgaria remains fully committed to the implementation of all OSCE commitments regarding Roma and Sinti. Certain progress in this field has been achieved, but challenges remain. Hardly an overall success story could be reported in any country addressing the Roma inclusion, as the efforts continue in search for lasting solutions and sustainable financial resources. We remain open to dialogue and constructive criticism, although some of the statements heard today went a little bit beyond it. We share the view that the existing policies in the country need to be redesigned to meet the best international human rights standards. We also acknowledge that the main problems of Roma population in Bulgaria are related to health, employment, education, and housing policy. The government has the clear understanding that the question of the successful integration of the Roma into society is of utmost importance, and that the state should work hard to achieve this goal. Bulgaria has an adequate and solid legal framework for combating all cases of racism, intolerance, and xenophobia. The authorities continue to be vigilant about any incident, since similar developments could not be underestimated. With regards to a case mentioned, mob attack against Roma in April in the city of Gabrovo, I'd like to state that the tension in the town grew after a video was released showing 3 Bulgarian citizens of Roma origin assaulting employees of a local shop. In order to prevent further tensions, 2 deputy prime ministers reacted immediately, including by going on the spot and initiating a meeting with the Ministry of Interior to peacefully decrease the tension. And in conclusion, and this is important, I would like to reconfirm that Bulgaria trusts and seeks the assistance of OSCE ODIHR for addressing some of the challenges related to anti-Roma attitudes and prejudices. Domestic violence and violence against women, and effective and human rights compliant policing in Roma communities. We commend the ODIHR contact point for Roma and Sinti issues for its dedicated efforts. We're thankful for this cooperation and supportive of ensuring sufficient financial and human resources for ODIHR's budget and that of its Roma contact point. Thank you.
Thank you. Next for right of reply is Ukraine, followed by Finland on behalf of the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, we completely support the statement of Mr. Dandogi, actually, about necessity to use internationally accepted definition in relation to the Roma community, actually the Roma, and not other. It is permanently experienced some participants of this meeting, the Russian delegation particularly. Secondly, we would like to present several facts that are especially important in the context of several statements that had been made today by some representative of the non-governmental organizations that are trying to use any opportunities to accuse Ukraine, not because of the objective situation in the country, but because it is designed for them role in Russia's organized ideological campaign against Ukraine. During 2018, almost 4,000 people, representatives of the Roma community, has received their identification documents, passports, which is in around 20% more than during previous year, 2017, when 3,200 have received their passports. Totally, during 2013 and 2018, around 15,000 people from the Roma community has received passport in the country. Because of the active position of the state in this dimension, realistically estimated percentage of people without identification document has decreased in Ukraine seriously from around 14-17% 6 years ago to 8-9% now. So, because of the special politics of the state migration service, which is doing everything possible to increase participation of the Roma community in the political life of the country, its participation in the presidential as well parliament elections, which we had recently, was completely ensured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next for a right of reply is Finland on behalf of the EU, followed by last on the list, which is Italy.
Thank you, moderator. I pass on the floor to the representative of the European Union.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I would like first to thank the civil society representatives that took the floor in this session and provided us with their assessments and recommendations on today's topic. Thank you. The OSCE commitments undertaken in this field are more relevant than ever, including those pertaining to participation in public and political life, and their full implementation continues to be the EU's guiding principle. In reply to the statement by the Russian Federation, since 2011, with the adoption of the framework for the national Roma integration strategies by the European Council, the European Union has put Roma and Sinti integration high on the political agenda. A solid policy, legal and financial framework has been developed at both EU and national levels, which is constantly being assessed and updated. A recent evaluation by the European Commission indicated that we have seen positive results and a change in trends. However, limitations remain and further steps are needed. I would like to reiterate that the EU and its member states remain strongly committed to fighting discrimination and accelerating the process of Roma's person integration. Mr. Moderator, the full list of countries aligning to the statement delivered in this session by Romania on behalf of the European Union is the following: North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Iceland, Liechtenstein, Moldova, Armenia, Georgia, and Andorra. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last on the list for a right of reply is Italy.
Grazie, signor.
Thank you, moderator. And thank you, Dan. I mean, this is I'm the last speaker this morning. I would like to compliment you on an excellent moderation of this session. I'd like to use my right of reply to respond to a declaration made by the delegation of the United States of America. I'd like to state that serious episodes of violence last spring concerning a number of gypsy families and attacks on the Roma and Sinti communities have been taken note of by the Italian authorities. A very high-level institutional reaction was immediately organized, in particular by the mayor of Rome. and the families that had been subject to threats were visited by him, and the authorities of Roma opened criminal proceedings for racial hatred and spreading hate speech. In fact, the criminal proceedings were opened against 18 people, and those are underway. So this has all been done in accordance with our Italian legislation. Thank you.
With this, we've concluded both the list of registered speakers as well as the rights of reply. In the remainder of the time, I would like to kindly offer the opportunity to our two introducers to reflect on what was said during the session. And I would suggest that you try to do this summary within 3 minutes. First, I pass the floor to Mr. Julius Rostos.
Well, thank you very much. As usual, this meeting is a forum where civil society and participating states could have a dialogue, and that went on today. And it was a pleasure to see some participating states reporting on the progress when it comes to Roma policies. Some of them even insisted on specific measures to stimulate Roma political participation. The representatives of civil society brought up important issues, and somehow in the replies of the government, rather, we heard very defensive positions instead of taking rather a proactive role and saying concrete measures on how to deal with those issues. I would address two of the specific points that I found really new, and they are directly connected with the political participation of Roma in public life. One is the call and the discussions around the recognition of anti-Gypsyism. Yes, I am aware that anti-Gypsyism is not a term used within the language of OSCE or DIR. But if we are so conservative when it comes to language, how about those specific measures to address historical discrimination against Roma? If language is so difficult to modify and to adapt to the new environment, how about specific measures for increasing political participation of Roma? I want to emphasize that recognizing anti-Gypsyism, it's more than just a simple bureaucratic issue, because as our colleagues from the German government emphasized, there is a need to study and to reveal its manifestations. There are also hidden forms that are not seen in everyday life. However, we have to document them, and I think that's a very good way to go on. I'd also point out that anti-Gypsyism is more than simple discrimination or even racism. Yeah? It includes, this is a systemic form of oppression of Roma that includes a component on patriarchy and sexism, and it will reveal important mechanisms through which Roma are excluded in our societies. So I would rather make that call to reflect on how to go beyond the mere recognition of anti-Gypsyism and how to address this issue systemically. The second one is the discussion on Roma Holocaust, another term that is not part of the OSCE or DIR language. And I was surprised to hear different governments talking about or using a term that many Roma organizations are not using it, poraimos. So I would rather invite the participating states in a symbolic gesture to recognize August 2nd as Roma Holocaust Day in Europe, that will be a very good test as a first step in increasing the political participation of Roma. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rosas. I would like to pass the floor now to our introducer, Ms. Zola Kondur.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank all the member states and civil society representatives for the statements, for the information provided, and also would like to thank the European Union joint statement with the member states and for United States statement and constant support of Roma issues in the OSCE region. I would like to emphasize the importance of effective implementation of the national Roma strategies that almost each member state implements. It's very important to involve Roma civil society representatives to use consultative mechanisms that already exist in many countries, and especially in those where, as I said in my speech, we have the community action groups or other initiatives supported by different international organizations. For me, it was very important to hear that the member states and the civil society representatives noted the role of Romani women, especially in political participation and political life. But for that, we have also to understand that special actions or special programs should be designed, or special policies, affirmative actions. And when we speak about Romani women, young girls, we have to give them quality education and, of course, equal opportunities for girls and boys. In principle, this is all, and I just want to thank you all for your commitments.
I would like to thank you both for your contribution and recommendations. Also, a big thank to all of those who registered on the speakers list and took the floor today. A big thank to our Roma civil society contribution to today's discussion. Thank you to all our interpreters. I would like to share with you a couple of technical information. The speakers list for the next session will open 1 hour before the session starts. Please arrive early, as when we reach the limit of 50 speakers, the list will be closed. Please note that only participants present with their own badge can sign up to the speakers list. I invite you also to the side events organized throughout the lunchtime, and as well for the afternoon working session focusing on Roma and Sinti, in particular with regard to the situation of housing, residence, forced eviction, and segregation. Last note, a very kind invitation on behalf of ODIHR's director, Ingebjörg Gisladottir, here with us. You are kindly invited to join the reception that is offered tonight, starting from 7:30 p.m. To 10 p.m. It's going to be at Misia number 3 building, but this kind of details will be provided. Participants are currently requested to present their HDIM badge at the entrance to the reception. ODIHR has arranged for transport to the reception venue. Buses will depart from the HDIM venue, PGE Narodowy, Gate 1, at 19:20. Thank you all very much.